Hi guys, my name is Vladimir. I think you hear me well. We are a Russian game development studio, Pixonic, situated in Moscow. We've been making games since 2009, and War Robots our biggest hit so far. I'll talk about the things that I think bother every game studio, no matter what game you're working on, what genre, what platform. Still, at some point, you have to think of them. Like, we've got some revenue now, we already have our game running and it has some core audience. What should we do next? How exactly are we going to grow? How to keep the revenue, how to increase it? All these things are very important for every studio, and I understand that the context of answering these questions is very different depending on the market background, on the history of the company, on the field of expertise. So I'll share with you my version of answering these questions at Pixonic. First of all, a bit about War Robots. It is a mobile game. It was released in 2014, and right now it's 5 years since release. It is a 6 versus 6 team PvP shooter where players pilot giant war robots fighting with various weaponry like lasers, machine guns, missiles, cannons, all that stuff. And the game is pretty popular so far. We have actually, this slide is a bit outdated. We have more than 120 million installs on all the platforms, and right now about 800,000 players pilot robots in our game every day. But back in the days when it was released, the game wasn't very good. It was released early and it had a lot of flaws, but still the core audience started to form up around the game. And I think that one of the main reasons of its success was that at the time there were very few mobile shooters on the market, and we were one of the few, and players had little choice, so they chose us. And we faced those questions. How are we going to grow? Since we are mobile, we are free to play, and we are game developers, we wanted to add new game features. And for the purpose of my talk, I'll divide them into two big categories, into two big groups. The first approach I call the hype model, and this is basically, they are divided by the chart you see after their release. The revenue chart, I mean. The hype model is characterized by a high spike after the release and a quick drop down afterwards. And it's mostly relates to all the content updates, all the DLCs, all this stuff. And it is all about creating something that is the value of the thing is very obvious to a player. That's why they just buy it right from the start and they don't need it anymore. Value growth model is a different approach, and it is a bit more tricky and more subtle. It is hard to create that thing because you are creating a need that is impossible to fulfill completely. It is like the very basic human needs, like the need for food, for sleep, for sex. You need to replenish it all the time. And so it's hard to design that because you have to think how it will change my game, not just after the release, but in 1 year, in 2 years, in 3 years after the release of the game. So to summarize, hype model is about creating a need that is possible to fulfill, and it instantly shows value to players. Value growth model is more about creating a need that is impossible to fulfill, and it continuously shows its value to players. Which one of these models is better? Actually, I can't say, and I think that each model is appropriate depending on your goals. If you need money fast, if you want to return them fast, in this case you use the hype model. If you're ready for some time to get more money, it would be more suitable for you to use the value growth model. So that's the main thing. Now let's try to compare the real features of our game, which serve as a, I think, perfect example of these two approaches. Basically, it is like a marshmallow test. When a kid is offered a marshmallow and a kid can eat it right now, or it can wait and get the second marshmallow. And back in the days, in 2015, we actually failed that test, I have to admit. We ate our marshmallow, we wanted our game to grow fast, and we needed budget to increase our user acquisition. That is why we chose the hide model approach, and we created a lot of features that were strived towards that goal. But the most successful one is the gacha. First of all, what do you need to create good gacha in your game? You need to have a lot of low-value items, because you want to keep the price of using the gacha low. Basically, it's like Kinder Surprise or any kind of a toy with a chocolate egg. You have a surprise inside, but even if you don't like the surprise, still you have the chocolate and you're satisfied with it. So first of all, gacha has to lead players to their goals. Every opening of the chest of some gacha item has to lead players to their goals in the game. And every use of gacha should stimulate the positive feedback. And it's the problem for a lot of gacha models in games. And it was a problem even for our gacha also, because right now I know that I shared with you, but at the time we actually didn't plan this like that. Finally, what we can do, and what real toy manufacturers can't, we can use the illusion of randomness instead of real randomness. Imagine that you are playing a game of dice and you get snake eyes 5 times in a row. And that's basically how real randomness works. That's okay for real randomness, but we humans perceive this as kind of unfair. We want gacha to be randomness to be regular. That is why, if you have controls over this, if you can direct player experience, in this case you'll get much more positive feedback. You won't get like the usual normal distribution with 3% of people getting all the good stuff and 3% of people getting all the bad stuff. The first introduction of the gacha in the game was in 2016 on the Halloween event. At the time, we actually were not sure if we will leave it in the game. That's why if the players didn't like it and the event ends, the game returns to its previous state and it's okay. There were very little UX features done at the time. It was just one type of chests, basic current event currency that was earned from battles, and you can open the chests with this currency and get rewards. And the only UX feature we had at the time that you could open multiple chests with just one tap. Actually, players liked it, and we continued to experiment with this design. And the second iteration was on New Year 17. We added super chest progression. That was our version of chocolate. We were trying to get players engaged into long term, and every opening of the chest added a small % of this progress bar, and when the progress bar filled completely, then players got a very good reward, like a lot of stuff. The third iteration was on Lunar New Year 17, and we added 2 more chests for people who actually want to use gacha more frequently, and for those who want only premium rewards, and so that player now can choose the price and the chest they want, but they are still earning the currency from battles. The fourth iteration on War Robot's birthday, we tried to avoid adding new event currencies, and we tried to use the regular hard currency of the game. But this was actually a bad change because players perceived hard currency in the game as a very valuable thing for them, and they didn't want to spend it on opening chests. That's why on the fifth iteration we returned to the event currencies, but we also try to maintain the good thing from the fourth iteration, which is a loop that was created by opening chests. It's like when you open the chest, you get the currency from it, and you can use this currency to open the next chest. It's like a gambling mechanic. Now, why we experimented so many times with this feature at all? Why we invested so much efforts into that? The answer is on this chart. You can see it is a revenue chart of our game, and every spike is when we actually released Gacha in the game, and the feedback was like it was only fine, the metrics were good, but we got our monetization much higher. That was our main argument why we decided that we need to implement Gacha in our game permanently, and we did it in September 2017. It was designed as follows. There were three currencies called key cards. They were red, green, and blue, and each of the colors represented time-limited seasons, so that when, for instance, a red key card season ends and players get compensated for all the key cards they have left on their accounts, now they have to earn green key cards. In this way, we wanted to prevent this currency to stack up, to hoard on players' accounts. And that worked. This feature was the most successful in terms of financial gain for robots, actually. We had 2 or 3 times increase of our revenue, and it was a new plateau for robots. We've got the fuel to experiment with many other things, and our LTV started to be really, really higher than before. The experiments were as follows. The wild offer system, I'll talk about it later. There were other versions of indirect sales system, because basically Gacha, what is Gacha? It is a way to sell your in-game content indirectly. It is a way to hide the real price of the item from players, because they don't know how many chests they have to open to get this item. And we also added a component system in our game. That was our way to sell half of the robot. It was a big problem for us right from the start, because the content in our game is very expensive, and we can't allow it to be cheaper, but we want it. So we added components. Now you can get 5,000 components, and you need 10,000 components to craft a robot. And that was our way to sell half of the robot. But at the time, there were changes on the market, and there was a very big media scandal around Star Wars Battlefront 2. It had a very big backlash, and I remember players writing on Reddit about our gacha system. Like, imagine if Darth Vader cost not 40 bucks, but 300 bucks, implying the price of the most expensive robot in the game. We've got a lot of negative feedback, but still game metrics were fine. The only problem on the charts were with iOS rating, and the drop down was significant for us, but it was low. So we continued. We definitely won in terms of money with this feature, but we've lost something. And the biggest impact was on our team's morale, because players reached every developer they could through social media and wrote them, "You're bad. You suck. We don't like what you do with the game. Please stop it." And people started to be ashamed of what they're doing. Imagine, like, you're working on one of the best mobile shooters in the world, and you don't like what you do. That's a problem. And it actually followed with slower production rates after that, because people were afraid to get another wave of hatred from our audience. And actually, that was the first time when we as a company understood that we are doing something wrong, and we need to change that. Now, let's summary this. Things for gacha that worked very well. Event gacha theming, and we continued to do that. Even after we implemented gacha permanently in our game, we still continue to create event themes for gacha, because it attracts attention and it works very good. If you have some exclusive content in gacha, it also serves as a way to boost your players' engagement in that feature. If there is some in-game content important for players that they can get only only from Gacha, it is good for this feature. And you should always try to address the needs of the most frequent users of this feature, because, for instance, we found that players don't really like to get currency from the gacha. They want to get content, they want to get robots and weapons. And we adjusted our drop table. We edited drop lists so that there would be fewer currencies. What didn't work? The progress bar, it didn't work. Nobody likes to open 700 chests to get super chests. It doesn't work as a goal. It's too long and too hard to make it for players. Additionally, nobody likes to win half of the robot, and components don't work well as a good prize, in our game at least. There was a period when we wanted to buy our users' loyalty and to increase the rewards in gacha. And that was good, but then we spotted that earnings of our players are higher than their spendings, and our in-game economy was in trouble. And you need also to think about that, to control the in-game economy. So it's not very good, and actually it didn't result in a boost of retention after that. So we wanted to get our retention higher, but it wasn't. Let's go to the second feature, the value growth model example, the wild offer system. What it is basically, it is an offer system that generates offers for players basing on their needs, and it offers robot setups, equipments, components, and some resources to players. But also, although the offer is generated, it is set in the boundaries on the back end by game designers. Like, you can have a discount from 10% to 25%, you can offer this type of robot and offer this type of weapon, but you can't offer this type. But in all the other stuff, it just generates them. The design pillars were as follows. First of all, iterative approach. In the beginning, we don't know anything about our user, and we just bombard them with a lot of offers. We are firing a shotgun of offers at them, and you can see here an imaginary dialogue between the system and the user, and at first it tries to offer different kinds of animals to user, but then at some point the system understands that this particular user likes lions, and it tries to offer him accessories for lions. In this way we can get from a very grape shot shooting to sniper precision aiming offers. The second principle is bargaining. It's very basic. If you say no, if you reject the offer, the next time you'll get it with a higher value or with a lower price. But if we used only these two principles, the best behavior to address this system would be to turn down every offer till you get the lowest price for the maximum value for the lowest price. And that is why we added the third principle, randomness to avoid predictability. We added a few offers between the real target offers. We call them noise offers. They create a noise in the system to make the pattern hardly readable for players. You can see here the orange outlined ones are real target offers, and the black ones, just a second, and the black ones are noise offers. Sometimes people buy them, but that's not their main goal. Their main goal is to disguise your algorithm. This system has problems, of course. It generates really lots of data, and you have to store all the transaction for every player on its account, and it's hard to analyze this ocean of data. The answer to mitigate that problem would be to segment, to divide players into cohorts and to try to seek patterns what this particular cohort likes. The second problem could be revenue cannibalization, because this is basically a discount tool, and if you're offering too big discounts, in this case you would probably cannibalize your revenue. You have to control that. Finally, although it works with discounts, it's hard to understand players' needs because it doesn't know anything about its in-game behavior, about whether this player likes brawler robots or whether he likes sniper shooting robots. You need to find triggers for that. For instance, we found a reliable trigger, a crafting system in our game when you craft components, and if a particular player crafts a lot of components of this type of robot, then probably we can offer him more components of this robot, or even the whole robot itself. We did some optimization of this system. We increased the frequency of generated offers. At first, it was once per day. We showed a new offer to a player once per day, but later we got to twice, to 2 offers per day, and it worked better. We also added faster movement between price tiers, so that when you buy, for instance, $10 offer, the next thing you get probably would be not $20 but $40 or even $60. We wanted the system to move faster from low price to high price and vice versa. Finally, we increased the cap of the initial offer. In the beginning, we don't know anything about the user, and we offer him $10 offer because it is the most frequent purchase in our game. But we found that if we increase this number to 20, in this case, it works better for our revenue. You can see the results of monetization of optimization on this chart. This is the real chart, and this is when we added this optimization to the game. Things for wild offers that worked really well is you need to, it's not the offer itself, but the context in which you make this offer. It's really important when exactly you are offering some things to your players. You need to find triggers for that, reliable, good triggers. You should really be careful when using low pricing, and for instance, don't show $1 offers to people who invested more than 1,000 into your game. It's just not feasible and completely doesn't make sense. And legal restrictions, I mean, we found, and that's pretty obvious actually, that if you're offering low tier content to high level players, they don't like it, they don't need it. That is why you should try to understand in which situation is this particular player you're offering. What didn't work? Again, nobody likes to buy half of the robot, and component system is a failure here also. As I already said, you shouldn't offer low price conversion offers to people who invested a lot into your game, and you should try to avoid unlimited currency giveaways because people get used to that really fast. And if you do that once, twice, thrice, probably they'll wait for the 4th iteration, and you probably don't want to make it. Let's try to compare these two approaches. These are the paying user percentage in our game, and the blue one is the gacha chart, and the pink one is the wild offer system. By the way, you can see here this drop down. That's exactly when we increased rewards in our gacha system, and the earnings were much higher than player spendings, and that resulted that players actually didn't need a lot of offers where a currency was offered. So this was the problem of this drop down. Now this is the revenue chart. You can see gacha is the blue one and wild offers is the pink one. And it probably would be easier for you to compare them if they were just isolated. Oh, I can return if you want to make a photo. Okay. You can see that in the beginning, gacha played a really important role in the in-game economy for our game, but later its role diminished because it's lost its value to our players. The results of this new approach were very good. Our team crisis internal faded away. And that's not just because of these two features. We had worked on many features asked by our players, improving the user experience. And our user rating in the end of 2018 was higher than ever before. And right now, with the wild offer system, our revenue is much more stable and predictable than ever before. And it is important for a marketing team that plans user acquisition budget for 1 year, for our investors team. You don't want to have high volatility on your revenue. This was the feedback from our users on the March update in 2019. You can see that we released UX improvements there, and players actually rated them high. So, what we've learned. For us, long-term planning works much better. If we think of features like what it will become in 1 year, in 2, in 3 year perspective, it is better for us. It is much more stable and predictable. We shouldn't underestimate the influence of our game community on the minds of our team. Even if it isn't shown in any metrics, still we are all humans, and we don't like when people say that we are doing something evil. And for us, uncontrollable growth was very bad. It is much easier to grow not in a very quick way, but much more predictably. Thank you for watching. I'm not trying to say that Gacha is evil here. I know a lot of games where Gacha was designed according to principles of the value growth model, and it is showing its value to players continuously, and it works fine. But you should think of consequences. You can use hype model approach, but you should understand that it will bring you high spike, but after that you need to think of something that will bring you another high spike. So you need to change these things quickly, or you can use this model, the value growth model. Actually, we use them both, and you can do that too. Probably you do that already. Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. I think it's a really good example of where you sort of focus in on what player value is, and you use data to drive that forward to be able to deliver kind of a better experience overall and still get better revenues. It's sort of something we kind of talk about, putting the love back into monetization almost.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions on that? Cool. Let me just bring you a mic.
Hi, thanks for your speech. How do you keep the top spenders keep spending for 3 years if they already got all your top gear in the first couple of months?
Well, we basically release new gear in the game. Right now, the depth of monetization in the game is very, very vast. It's hard to get all the things, and when we add new content, we want it to be competitive. We know that our top players always want to increase their power in the game, and we add new things, new dimensions. We added modules, we added pilots recently. All the things affect your in-game power, and we are basically selling power in the game.
And it's kind of interesting when you think about selling power in a game, because I remember when Ben Cousins was first doing Battlefield Online, this is like 2011, and when they first went free to play, everybody was saying, no, you must not buy things of power.
And a lot of games actually do that. They don't monetize power. They say, like, we are not pay to win, we are competitive, and it works for them, like League of Legends, that's okay. But that niche, I think, is not big for all the games.
Well, I think there's actually, I think the jury's out on that. I think there is a genuine case for games which, at the heart, is about skill. For them to be able to have that skill. And I think the trick to be able to sell power in that context is that you don't sell absolute power. You sell, here's a positive in one way, but it makes you have to sacrifice play methods.
Absolutely, 100%. It would be much better to sell what we call context spike of power. Like right now, against this particular player, I have the power advantage, but in another situation, it won't be.
And in fact, you might be more vulnerable as a result of that specialization. And I think, when we start taking away the sort of linear thinking, there's no one wants a +1 hat when they can have a +10 hat. But if I could have, something which is the red sword of power versus the blue shield, now we're starting to have to make strategic choices.
Yep.
And actually, what I think happens when I look at analysis of monetization there is that people care more about the things they bought.
Yep.
And if they care more about the things they bought, I don't know if you find that with the robots, I imagine you do, that people actually then start looking back at what they've spent and go, hey, that was pretty cool. Look at my collection of amazing robots.
You know what? Probably you heard the term about among the players' communities, they call something OP, overpowered. And we find a very nice correlation between the things that players call OP and what they buy. They hate it because it ruins the game balance, but they buy it. They want it.
And again, it's about finding that right space, because if for example, I think with Reality Clash, a blockchain-based game, we had the idea of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 weapons, because we wanted the ability to be able to have limited events which are only going to allow tier 1 weapons and others which would only allow tier 3 weapons. And that ability to then make those decisions meant that you would have open access to people who weren't willing to spend money, but also people who were, but actually were more interested in their skill set. And I think that open-minded, that long-term planning, like you said, again, is critical. By the way, the reason I'm carrying on the question a bit longer than maybe the normal time frame is that we had a dropout later, so I'm trying to make sure we use the time with these speakers as best we can. So, bear with me. Does anyone have an extra question? I can literally talk about this for days, but I think that's us done. So thank you very much.
Thank you guys for listening. Thank you for coming.